had a close encounter with something in his flight path. So, you know, there's a dramatic difference in like the type of things that are coming in on those reports. And that was what they were going to do, is essentially go through those cases, and they pick out the really good ones, and then, you know, pass them up to where I was, where I'd send investigators out to work on them. And these guys all got paid, you know, expenses, everything. And so that's kind of with my claim to fame.
Oh, that's a lot to claim.
Yeah.
When we were talking on the phone, you mentioned the Bigelow Project.
Yeah.
Now, I know pretty much, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but I pretty much know how that started. But go ahead and tell and how that relates to the UFOs, because I know what it is. And I don't know if you guys, Sean or Jason, did your research on that, on him. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, in my book, there's the biggest chapter in the book is about the what we call the Bass MUFON SIP project. And essentially what happened is the Defense Intelligence Agency was trying to figure out a way to finance some investigation teams. And so ultimately, behind the scenes, they made a deal with Bigelow to work with MUFON. MUFON's the largest, UFO organization in the world. It's a civilian organization. Mm-hmm. And over the last 30 years, they've accumulated, they've got a database of like thousands and thousands of case reports. And then, as you know, you've worked on some of those cases. Once the case reports come in, you go and you investigate them and put the data in there. So mm-hmm. they've got this really extensive database that's been built up over 30 years of all these case reports. And so basically the guys at Bigelow Aerospace wanted to start looking at those cases. So they made a deal with MUFON basically to buy the case report information. And so when the project started, as I said, I managed the project, but essentially we were getting paid, like they were paying us like $56,000 a month for us to pass on the best case reports to them.
Okay, now a lot of people watching or listening, they don't know what we're talking about. Now, this goes back to the property, the 480 acres.
Well, you're talking about the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah,
right?
Does that have to do with that or not?
Well, sort of.
Okay.
Basically, in 1985, Robert Bigelow put together a team of people to study like unusual phenomena, and he at that time he bought the Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch has an unbelievable amount of paranormal activity there.
Yes, and it does.
There was a book that was written by George Knapp that we all know, and Colm Kelleher. And basically, they talked about all the stuff that was going on at the ranch. Well, the group that was originally commissioned to do that kind of work, when Bigelow set up the SIP project, the same guys basically were, they went from the NIDS organization to the Bass organization, but it was basically the same people that were involved. Now, what we were doing, we were investigating UFO cases, but I believe that they were still doing a lot of testing on them at the ranch when that was all going on. But my work didn't involve, I was never at the ranch. I probably could have gone, but I never did because we were so busy with the cases we were working on.
Okay.
So
go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah. Last week's guest, she was part of, what was her name, Jen?
Margie K. She's part of the STAR team. Do you know her, Richard?
I can't say it again. I didn't hear you.
Margie K. You don't know her?
Well,
the name's I'm trying to play.
Okay.
How do you, Richard, consider a UFO report, to where you actually leave your house and get to this place? I mean, do you go to every little one that you see?
No. And like I said, when we were running that project, we were getting 800 reports coming in every month. And there's a variety of different, elements to those. So what we would do is we would go through the cases and we'd vet them. And basically we had criteria that we used to determine how useful and how important that case might be. Just for example, if a case report came in, it was from a police officer or a pilot or some military officer, or an FAA person or an astrologer, somebody that's like qualified like that, those kind of reports would go up to the top of your list, obviously. So ultimately what we would do is we'd have maybe 30, 35 case reports came in that we thought were real high quality. And then what I would do is look at them, and then based on what was involved, we had funding to pay for hotels and rental cars and airplane flights, and we paid the investigators. And so then I just deploy somebody and send them out to interview the witnesses and start a case report up. If that makes sense.
But see, here's where I get really that blows my mind away about all this investigating is someone saw something and like 2 seconds later it's gone. Okay.
Yep.
How can you make a determination if we'll just say an FAA or a pilot sees this thing, calls you, but that pilot only saw that for like maybe 30 seconds and it's gone. So how can you determine that it was a good case to go and investigate?
You just read my mind, Sean.
Well, the problem is you don't always know if it's a good case or not until after you go out and start interviewing people, so you can understand what was going on. The problem, and again, the reason, the purpose of my book was to help train people that are more advanced investigators and people that are, experienced researchers. And there's a lot of stuff in my book about the what we call high strangeness. Basically, these are things that are, there's a whole section in my book talking about anti-physical elements. And by that, I mean, it's just like what you said, is something will materialize, they'll see it, and then boom, it's gone. It disappears. And those kind of things are very common in these cases. And what we'll try to do is train people to understand a little bit about how that works. You realize that some of this stuff is multidimensional, and it's also, it's time dilated and that kind of thing. And that's the concept that I'm trying to convey in my book, is to help people understand. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Makes sense. Yes.
A lot of this is, and I said in the book, when I first started out, I was a pilot and I had a pretty scientific education. And I'm out there thinking, I've got a good camera and binoculars and magnetometers and radiation detectors. We're gonna figure out what happened, what's going on. And 30 years later, it's like you realize that there's so much to this, that the paranormal part of it is where most of this is. That's where you really have to dig into it. And unfortunately, a lot of investigators are just looking for trace evidence. And it's the, it's the anti-physical, the high strangeness stuff is where a lot of the cases really come together.
Okay.
When you were on your investigations, did you see anything that you would think that stuck out as it could be possible that it was a non-human entity? Or do you believe, I should just do that one first, but I have so many questions regarding the disclosure that they're going to be talking about, releasing.
Right.
Like, how do you know that they're actually telling the truth? I mean, how much do you think is actually going to be disclosed? Do you think they're going to I doubt it, but do you think they're going to disclose anything non-human?
Well, what they might disclose or not disclose and what's really going on are two different things. Mm-hmm. I can assure you that, I've been reading right before you guys hooked up. I was reading some of these reports that some of these congressmen are coming out and, they're talking about like it could be, technology from China or Russia. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah,
You're not going to sell that to the American people, because it's not that stupid. But,
Nope.
Exactly.
I've been doing this for 30 years and I've seen things and interviewed people that there is just no doubt in my mind this is extraterrestrial. And it's not just, it's not just, they say, well, they talk about the extraterrestrials. Well, it's not just a society or a group of extraterrestrials. There's probably about 4 or 5 different species of them that come here for different places. in different times, and they've got different agendas, and you know that it's been going on for a long time. In the book, I put a list of the we put together a list of crash retrievals, and we started with Roswell. And if you when you look in the book, you'll see there's almost 2 pages of them. There's about 40 of them that have been recovered.
For someone who hasn't read your book, could you give us a little glimpse into what's in there?
Well, I mean, that's as far as what disclosure is concerned.
Yeah, you said there's four different races that visit the planet.
I think that's I think that based on years of research and interviews that I've done, and the kind of work I was doing, I was being able to connect with some of the best guys, you know, the people who are really in the forefront of this in the world. And there's, you know, and there's research. There's more than one species that's probably been involved in this. And I think, you know, if you watch the shows like Ancient Aliens, they've been around for a long time.
Do you think there's any kind of hybrid, like a human alien race living among us?
You know, one of the from what I understand, one of the species is humanoid, and if you were sitting in a restaurant, you'd never know it.
You'd never know it.
Yeah. But,
okay.
Except they're probably, you know, mentally a little bit
more
exactly
intelligent.
More advanced.
Well, they got to come out with the glasses, man. They got to come out with the glasses.
I know.
Yeah, so we can see them.
Yeah.
X-ray vision.
Yeah. There's no way that they're gonna they would never even admit if there was. I don't believe they would.
I think right now they're in here's the deal. You've basically got, you know, this is what I think is going to happen as far as disclosure goes. And a lot of people don't understand that when you talk about disclosure, it's 2 prongs. Mm-hmm. Okay. One of them is the government, and the other one is the military industrial complex, the defense contractors. And in my book, I've got a pretty good section in there about how this is like, how did all this secrecy start? And basically, you're looking back in the Truman administration and Eisenhower administration. These things start crashing, they're recovering them. And then what they're trying to do is, you know, develop the technology. So particularly during the Eisenhower administration, they started farming out a lot of this stuff to private companies.
Yeah.
So what they do is they take wreckage that was recovered in a UFO accident or a crash and like give it to a company and get them to do the research and development on it. There's a book that was written by Philip Corso and Bill Burns. It's called The Day After Roswell, and that's basically what he's talking about. He's a you know, an Army intelligence guy, and his job is to go and take this wreckage and go out to corporations and provide that to them and make deals with them to do research and let them have patent rights and make money on it and all that kind of stuff, but keep the technology for the military. And if you don't believe, you know, if you read his book and you don't believe one word that's in his book, all you got to do is look at the companies he talked about back in the 60s. And now they're the multi-billion-dollar companies in the world. You know, he talked about like fiber optic tubing went to Bell Laboratories, and Kelvar went to DuPont, and the microchips went to like IBM and Texas Instruments. And those, you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
If he's lying, then how did these companies make like billions and billions of dollars on this technology?
No, is that the same? That's not the same man as Robert Lazar, is it?
No,
okay, and
no.
he believed that he actually went down into, was it Area 54 or 51, or was it Deuce?
It was Dolce.
Yeah, totally different.
There's a lot of different pronunciations.
Pronunciations.
What you're gonna I think find out with the disclosure thing is the government's gonna come up and say, yep, here's pictures of these fighter jets chasing these UFOs, and they're gonna let you see pictures of them and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is so much of that technology's been developed by private corporations.
Yes.
And they're not under any obligation, like under, you know, Freedom of Information Act requests, and they're certainly not subject to this congressional mandate to declassify the UFO stuff. So basically the government's going to come out and here's pictures and all that, but we gave the wreckage to XYZ company and we don't know where it is anymore. in the meantime, these companies have all this stuff and they developed this technology, but they're not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you what's going on, partly because they're making like billions of dollars on the technology they're developing.
It seems like they always disclose things when they get caught doing something or something. Somebody comes out like, there's all these secret underground bunkers. Like my son went to Greenbrier, went to med school in Greenbrier, West Virginia, and there's that underground bunker that came out. It seems like they got caught and they had to, disclose what.
And that's a good point, because I actually talked about that in my book. When you talk about disclosure, basically what happened is during the Eisenhower administration, they put a wing on the hotel. And while they were putting the wing on the hotel, they built this huge bunker underneath the hotel. I'm talking about a bunker big enough to hold 300 people from Congress.
Have you been there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go there and take a tour. I think they charge you like $40.
Oh, wow.
It's really cool. It's really cool. But I mean, it's huge. They had a hospital facility, auditoriums, bunk rooms for 300 people, restaurant, the whole bit, And they built this thing in during the Eisenhower administration, and it was like standby ready for 30 years. Well, what happened was, the way they did it is the money that was used to build the underground bunker was laundered through the railroad company that serviced that town.
Wow.
So that's how they kept hid all the money and everything. But anyway, they built this huge facility underneath the Greenbrier, and they did it secretly because they were building the addition at the same time, and nobody could figure it out. Okay.
There's secret walls and everything that you you go sneak behind.
But this thing is huge. It's like 12. It
has a whole like bunker. It has beds. It has a kitchen. It has everything.
But here's the problem. Okay, so what happened? The Washington Post ran an article on it, and basically blew their cover. So the government's like, okay, so they declassified it, like what we're talking about, declassify. Okay, that's the key here. So what happened?
Declassified. Okay.
So they declassified. Well, then the next thing you know, all these lawsuits and warrants are being sworn out, because what happened was they built this huge facility in like the primest real estate in the country, and for 30 years nobody paid any property tax or anything on it. You see what I'm saying? So there was this like legal nightmare, because now the city and the county, or the county and the state, were suing them and putting liens on there and all kinds of legal problems because they didn't pay the property tax, and there was a lot of taxes and stuff like that didn't pay. So when you start declassifying this stuff, that's the kind of thing you're going to see happening, where oh, this place didn't exist, and now here it is, and oh, well, what about the taxes? What about the wage taxes, the people that work there, and all those kind of things? See, so they'll be, and not only that, but some of these companies, they've developed technology with resources that were provided to them by the United States government. And some of that real high technology has never been shared with the public. So there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to be real happy when they start figuring out what happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Jason, you're quiet. What do you have to say? Since you're an paranormal investigation, how does this relate to you? How would you,
Yeah, I'm curious about like the investigation, at what point, when you're investigating, do you decide that, it's a legit case, or like, somebody is making something up, but they have stuff to show, like how do you differentiate between the two if there's like visual stuff to look at?
Well, and that's a great question, because that's just the essential element of all this. And one of the things that I was just thinking to say too is that, I got the chance to go and speak at the National Paranormal Coalition one year. It was up in Lynchburg, and it was a pretty good sized conference. And there was a lot of people that do like paranormal investigations there. They invited me because of my UFO experience. But when you get out there and spend 3 days talking to these guys, a lot of the things that they're experiencing and detecting and seeing are very similar to the same phenomena that we're dealing with, which is really interesting. But when we investigate, basically people say, well, what do you think, or what do you believe? Well, it doesn't matter what I believe. I just look at facts and data. So if I'm out there working on a case, I'm not going to tell you what I think or I believe, but basically what we try to do is validate information and a lot of times do testing and collect data And sometimes it can be very interesting. Like I'll give you an example. We had a case that we did up in New York, and actually Discovery Channel Canada made a TV show about it. But basically, this guy's driving home one night, and he has this encounter with a UFO that he's driving down the country road, and he sees this light, and every time he comes over the hill around the corner, the light's getting closer. Next thing you know, he pulls over, and this thing is like right on top of him.
Ooh.
And it scares him. Well, what happened was when it kind of got right over top of him, all of a sudden everything in the car went dark. The headlights go out, the dash lights go out, the radio goes off, the motor is stopped, his cell phone's dead, and he's like sitting there in the dark. And now he's getting scared. I remember him telling me, he's like, I wasn't sure if I want to get out of there and run or stay in a car or what. Well, eventually what happened was he was able to get the door open. And when he got the door open, he kind of looked out like this, still had the seatbelt on. And when he did that, the thing disappeared. I'm saying, did it fly away or what happened? He goes, I don't know. I just got the hell out of there. But the thing that a couple of the really interesting things about that case were, I sent an investigator up there that would like the next day to meet with this guy. And when the investigator walked up to the car, he said, and this is a guy with like a physics background. He said when he walked up to the car, he put his hand up. And you know how like when you open a cleaner bag and you got a wool sweater in there and you got that static cling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Feel that almost like 10 inches away from the car. You walk up the car, you can feel a static cling on it. And so what we did is we did a whole bunch of tests on the car, and it had this like huge magnetic field around it. Ooh. And just to be sure, it was a new Mitsubishi. So I flew back up the next week, and we met with the guy a second time. But what we did was we went to the Mitsubishi dealer where he got the car, and we did a search, like a dealer locate, and we found a car that was in the same assembly line as that car. It was like 6 cars back in the assembly line. So it was made at the exact same date and time, had all the same equipment and everything on it. So we found the car at a car dealer. I sent a guy out there to do all the same tests on it to make sure there wasn't some kind of a magnetic anomaly in this car. And of course, the test car, there was nothing on it, But I mean, that's how thoroughly we'd work these things to try to find out what was going on. But the field was incredible. I mean, it just had this huge magnetic field. So, was the guy telling the truth? Well, something happened to his car that did that to him.
Something happened.
Maybe the UFO was drawn to it. Maybe like him or the vehicle had the energy, and then maybe that's why
that's possible, Jason. That's very possible.
Yeah, it's kind of like spirits.
Yeah, actually. Richard, I have a question to ask you there.
Go ahead.
Real quick.
Sure.
Have you ever been reading up on Missing 411?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dave Paulides, sure. I'm a fan of his. I think he does really good work. Yeah.
I love Dave.
Okay. Do you believe that the people that have gone missing are due to aliens, extraterrestrial? Do you believe that?
Well, I think there's some type of interdimensional portal. I touched on that in my book, and there's a section in there about the anti-physical stuff. And I think, and again, I don't want to get ahead of him because he really does good work, but there's some type of a portal there. Something happens where those people just get like, taken away. He's done really good work. And the way he explains, like there's certain criteria, things that happen on those cases.
Right.
And this guy like worked on 1,800 cases, and he's a really good, he's an ex-cop. He's a good investigator. He does really quality investigative work. Because I've read some of his stuff and watched a bunch of his videos, and I think he's really on to something that's really interesting. And these people, like the point of contact where they walk away from their group and zap, they're gone. And
right.
The researchers or the rescue guys are out there for a week looking for them, and they can find them. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, I think he knows too much. Maybe he's gonna disappear because he just knows too much. In the parks, they don't let him in now. They don't let him film. It's a shame.
Well, part of that's because it's like, they're in business,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't want to
Yosemite, and you've had
tarnish their reputation of having
here.
disappearing people.
Yeah,
Campers.
you don't want that out in the public.
Yeah, you don't want to disappear.
Well, unless there's some people you don't like, then you can just
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
He's done some really, really good work, and it's really interesting. In my book, I talked about in anti-physical stuff. I talked about interdimensional portals, and the difference, and then also talking about abduction. And the biggest thing is, as far as I can see, is the difference between somebody like disappearing in a portal and disappearing in an abduction is that the portal seems to be locked to some geographic area. It's in some area, where the abduction can occur anywhere. The craft will fly over your house and you get abducted. But it doesn't have to be any particular geographic location. That's the biggest thing, I think. But it seems a lot of the things that happen during abductions that are very similar to what he's describing.
Do you think that Stonehenge was really a portal? Could it have been a portal at some point?
Well, I've not really researched that much, but it's sure some of the stuff they talk about there is really interesting. Same thing with pyramids. They align with certain, like stars and stuff like that. But
are there any portals that you know of that maybe exist at a particular location?
Well, the Skinwalker Ranch is probably the most glaring example of that kind of stuff. In my book, I talked a little bit I have a chapter in there about perception of reality. And when I was in Florida one day flying by myself in an airplane, and in Florida, the weather's beautiful down there. You got these great skies. I'm out over the Everglades, and I see this. What it looked like a window that had fire burning in it.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
And I basically said, if you took your hand and held a credit card out like at arm's length, that's about how big it was. And so people will go, "Well, did you fly into it?" I'm like, "Yeah, hell no."
Was it like a sunset? Was it
No,
dawn?
it was there. I was out flying around for about an hour, and it was just stationary out there.
Okay, was it like maybe an optical illusion with the sun?
No. But
what do you call it? Tails?
No.
Chemtrails?
The pilots, when we got back to the operations base, the pilots had seen it, and here the story they gave us was that the Air Force was dropping foil to check their radar, and we're like, "Oh, good, thanks."
Dropping foil,
yeah,
sort of like my hat here.
Yeah, it's dropping like right. And so at the time I believed it, but then some of the research I've done since then, including some of the things that I've read about the Skinwalker Ranch, I realized it was a portal, But that's
speaking of these. Oh, sorry, but we're talking about these portals. Now with the interdimensional portals that you're talking about, as far as like UFOs and everything like that, do you believe that there's a difference between those types of portals and the portals that spirits channel through? That like we experience in the paranormal world, or are they like all one and the same, and it just depends who wants to come through it?
Well, I'm not an expert in like a lot of the paranormal stuff, the spirit tracking that you're talking about, but I'd say the portals are pretty much. I believe that they're located they're at a certain location, and I'm not sure. I haven't got enough research or background to say what. I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but I'm not sure how it all works. But when I was at the Paranormal Coalition, some of those guys, some of the research they've done is just like incredible, Yeah. And I remember one of the techniques that they use. They have tape recorders that have delays. Have you ever worked on those things, where it's got like a little tape recorder, and when it records, and then 5 seconds later you hear what it's recording.
Oh, that's cool.
And we use recorders and then review it later.
Yeah, we use regular DVRs, digital voice recorders, and I got the best sitting right there on screen who's good at reviewing our EVP evidence. And
we've got a lot of stuff. A lot.
Yeah, always.
But he'd go to
that,
these places like the Civil War
oh yeah,
battlefield, and
Gettysburg.
he'd be in there with this earpiece in, and basically the recorder, it's recording everything, but it gives you a 5-second delay before you hear it, and then he could hear people talking and stuff. It's really interesting.
I'll have to check that out. But
Yeah.
John, you were saying earlier that the government, you know, for all the UFO crashes that were happening, right? They sent it off to different companies.
Yeah.
Right. Is it possible? And you know, I believe they're UFOs and I believe in your research, but is it possible that these companies that are doing things could throw stuff out in the air, make believing that it's possible that they are UFOs? No, I'm serious.
Well, one of the things that happened, like when I worked with the people at Bigelow, a few months ago, the Defense Intelligence Agency came out and said that Bigelow, in the underground facility at Bigelow Aerospace, they had crashed wreckage from UFOs that they were doing research on. So they really, I mean, they really were there. And that when you look at all this stuff that's going on out there, and there's all different types of shapes and sizes and different types of phenomena that people call UFOs. I would say that the ones that are triangle, you see a lot of the triangle shaped UFOs. I think there's a very high possibility. I'm almost positive that those are like advanced military experimental aircraft. The triangle ones are pretty for sure. But some of these other things, I mean, they just surpass, like you know, we're talking about stuff that's up there. It's a couple miles in diameter.
Yeah.
It's unbelievably huge, you know, it's not terrestrial.
Right. Yeah. I was just wondering.
Do they have any like evidence that I mean, on film of these big, huge crafts? I mean, is this something that a couple people saw across in Brazil?
Well, one of the things that I always like to think about, you remember the case with the Phoenix Lights back when that happened? And at the time, the governor, his name was, I think it's Simonson. He was when that was all going on, you know, they were on TV, and he did a press conference, and they had some guy come out with an alien suit on and try to make fun of it and everything.
Sort of like that alien autopsy.
Yeah. Well, after he was governor, about 10 years later, he did a video. And if you want to see something that will blow you away, go watch his video, because basically he's saying, look, you know, we that scared the crap out of us. We didn't know what to do. And he said, I was in the Air Force, and basically he went out there that afternoon. He said, I saw that thing. And he said, this thing was like 1.5 miles across. That's how big it was.
Wow,
and he goes, amazing. I'm telling you, that wasn't from this planet, you know? So yeah, there's film and stuff like that. But even then, you know, and he did say that. He said that, you know, the lights that the Air Force went out and started dropping flares that night to try to do a cover story for it, to try to smoke up the mirrors, you know. But he said that they did that. He admitted they did it. But if you can, go watch his video. It's really quite compelling.
Go ahead. Why do you think the military is covering this up? You've been in the business for 30 years. Yeah.
Well, I in my book, I've talked about that during the Truman administration, when the first Roswell crash hit, one of the senators, and I don't have his name on the tip of my tongue, but basically he had a meeting with Truman that day. And when he left, he went back and got a hold of all the broadcast companies and basically told them, if you don't drop this UFO story right now, we're going to pull all your broadcasting licenses today.
Oh, wow.
I saw that on Project Blue Book, the series.
So I mean, they do what it amounts to is I think that when I try to articulate this as my book as best I could, but basically when the government started recovering these things, they realized there was a really high potential for technology to be used for like military applications. And so they made decisions early on to keep it quiet. And then the other problem that a lot of people don't the other side of that was, at the same time, the Germans were doing the same thing. And the Germans had recovered a lot of UFO wreckage, and they were doing a lot of research on it too. Well, when And some of that had to do with the anti-aircraft radar they were using during World War II. They were using a lot of this really high powerful radar, like to protect from enemy planes flying and bombing them. And a lot of people, the consensus is that radar was jamming up their propulsion system, which causes the saucers to crash. It's like an electrogravitational field, and it somehow interrupts it, and they crash. And so, in the book, there's a list of about 30 crashes. But basically, the Nazis had done the same thing we were doing. Well, when the war was over, the Americans went over there and rounded up all those Nazi scientists. I mean, it's all documented. It's called Operation Paperclip. And basically, they got these guys and they said, here's the deal. We'll repatriate you to the United States. We'll fix you up with a nice home, give you a nice job. You'll be working in NASA and other research facilities, and you'll work for us. And you can bring your family and we'll pay and all that. Or, you can go to the firing squad. So most of them decided to come to America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They helped put men on the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think that on the other aspect of the of everything, we got the technology side, do you think they also kept it quiet from like the general population to prevent like a mass hysteria? But nowadays in 2020s, more people are into the paranormal, more people are into UFOs, so it's not such a big deal.
Well, I think, I remember back, about 10 years ago, AOL did a study, and they interviewed 500,000 Americans, or 500,000 people. And basically they asked them, do you think that these things are extraterrestrial, and do you think the government's hiding something? And about 72% of the people answered yes. Well, now if you do that survey, about 90% of the people are going to answer yes, of all the stuff that's going on. So they did hide it. I think the reason that they hid it was more for
to save toilet paper.
No, it was to make money on technology. They made a lot of money on the technology, and I think that probably these defense contractors, I mean, some of these contractors that make these missile systems and stuff, they're using all those microchip circuits and everything.
Yeah, well, those are from the extraterrestrials.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that the CEO of IBM, this was about 10 years ago, when he retired, he was in England. So you don't talk about this stuff in America on TV because they won't let you. But he was over in England, and he gave a speech, and he said the original microchip technology we developed came from extraterrestrial spacecrafts. He said that on TV.
I believe that.
Well, you saw all those X-Files where those episodes, and they had to get their information from somewhere. I truly, as an author, I don't think that they just came up with it. They got it from somewhere. That these people like Scully, she had that chip in her, and to keep track of where they're monitoring them. I believe that they're doing that right now, and I know people think I'm crazy for saying it, but yeah.
Oh, that's
definitely
cell phone.
They're just tracking us, and
you start talking about something, your phone picks it up, and all of a sudden you get like 30 ads for it.
Yeah.
No, you're not even scrolling. You're talking about it.
It's like we're talking about it right now, and talking about whatever.
They listen to in my book. I talked about that. There's a chapter in there about retrieval teams, and I just happen to have some pictures of one of them coming back from a thing that I'm not going to say how I got them, but anyway, they're in my book. And basically, I put this thing together in like trying to, telling somebody, if you're involved in something like this and there's a retrieval team out there, here's the things you got to worry about. And, it's like, they're not going to be nice to you. If you try to sneak into an area where they've quadrated it off or something like that, they're going to arrest you and hold you. Yeah. And one of the things that I mentioned in there was your cell phone is like your worst enemy. Yeah. If you get involved in something like that, they can track you. I have some experience in law enforcement, and they use this technology like to track drug dealers and stuff like that, and they can hear they can turn your phone on and listen to what you're saying and going on and everything. It's like, so if you go and you get in the middle of one of these crashes, and you want to call your girlfriend up and brag about it, that they're going to be zeroing in on you like there's a helicopter going to land next to your car. But yeah, absolutely, the technology is and even you know, and what I try to, in my book, I talked about this when we first started doing cases. I'm going back in, you know, like 25 years ago. This is before they had those computerized case management systems. In the first UFO reports, they were done on paper. You'd get a manila envelope that would come in the mail. You open it up and you fill it all out. When you were done, you take some pictures with your 35 millimeter camera, take them to the drugstore, get them developed, and then send everything back, you know. And then, of course, when you went to the drugstore to pick your pictures up, somebody already picked them up the day before, you know. I'm not kidding. Actually, that used to happen quite a lot. But they used to follow people around, you know. And I have one thing in my book where I know that somebody was following me around.
I believe it.
But they don't need to do that anymore because you've got cell phone. First of all, if you work on a UFO report, you put all that information in there. Everything you know about it's in there. So why do they need to follow you? They can just look it up, or they can check your phone out and see who you've been talking to and monitor your web visits. So that they don't follow people around. The men in black and the government boogeymen, they don't follow people around anymore, but they really used to do that.
Oh, I believe it. They do. I know in my books, I have the Men in Black, and I have all that
Here
stuff.
come the Men in Black.
It was weird when I was writing the book. I always thought, because the weird thing would start happening, and when I would go talk about on radio shows, I go, wait a minute, because I'm talking about the Illuminati, I'm talking about the Project Blue Book, I'm talking about MJ12, I'm talking about all this stuff that, and I in my book, I'm talking about that there's aliens, like you said, in the restaurant next to you that looks just like you and me. You don't know who they are. Same with those bad guys from the government coming to get you. You don't know.
Well, there was clearly a time when we were we're very paranoid about that. And I think that, you know, trying to understand, now we know that the funding that came for the projects I work on basically came through the Defense Intelligence Agency, through the Pentagon. But you see, the government agencies, we used to call them silos. You know, the CIA, the NSA, they don't talk to each other, and they compete with each other, so they don't share information any more than they have to. So you might be working for one group, and then there's another group that's trying to screw up what you're doing. You know, that kind of thing.
That's crazy.
The whole thing's crazy.
Yeah, it is. Jeez. Now, with me and Jason being paranormal investigators, say like we decided, how do we find a MUFON investigator and maybe go on an investigation and see for ourselves how it's actually done? How do I go by doing that?
I'll be happy to come and spend some time with you guys. Are you guys in Pennsylvania? Well,
yeah,
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I got a lot.
Oh, nice.
I'm up there often. But yeah, I'd be glad to hook up with you guys and talk about some of that stuff.
That'd be cool. That would be all. That would be great.
Yeah, and I've often thought about it because, like I said, some of these guys that you know that I've met during the during some of these conferences, a lot of the things that are going on, the paranormal investigators, they're crossing the same type of stuff that we were, the phenomena, right? You know? And I think, you know, when you look back in the 1800s and you know, you read a story that's like maybe a ghost story or something like that, it could have been an alien abduction too. You know what I'm saying? That they just called it a ghost because they didn't have any, for lack of something better to call it, you know?
Right.
But some of that stuff is in one of the things in the book that I talked about, when you talk about the paranormal or the, you know, the high strangeness stuff, is a lot of the psychic effects are really interesting. You know, it's like what you were saying before, where you'll read a report and somebody will come out and say, well, you know, I went out and I was walking my dog at 1 o'clock in the morning, or I went out to have a cigarette on the porch. You know, I saw this light at great distance and high altitude. Well, the next thing you know, the things like, seems like it can interact with my thoughts, you know, and it can tell what I'm thinking. And then the next thing, it's on top of me. And you think, well, that's kind of really creepy, but I can show you hundreds of reports where people said that exact thing. You know what I'm saying?
They took Jenny and she's back.
I get it abducted every now and then. Every now and then I get it taken away.
Do you believe that, you know, there's a lot of people that talk about how like their families targeted by UFOs, and then they get repeat visits and abductions and stuff. Do you believe, that that happens to specific people?
Well, when you do abduction research, you'll find that if you like the people I work with, I just didn't go out and follow some. I've got 30 of them where I spent some serious time with them and got to know them and talk about them, about their experiences. And interestingly, like a woman will tell me, she's been abducted. And then if you really start digging into it, you'll find out that her mother had the same experience. That kind of thing. For some reason, whether they're tracking genetic traits in people or whatever, but some of these people, that seems like their families, like, over periods of years have had the same experiences. Interesting.
I believe I can see that happening.
Yeah.
Well,
so it just does, but and it's just fascinating, some of the things that people, a lot of times, if you really get to know people and interview people that have been abducted, they'll tell you what was going on, like what the entities were, they communicate with them and they're telling them stuff. A lot of times they're prophetic, giving them information about events that might have happened and things like that. And it's just, you can learn a lot by listening to them, particularly because, if you go interview 20 people and none of them know each other or have any connection to each other, and they're telling you all these little bits of information that are the same as what all the other people told you, you got to figure there's some resonant truth in it, if that makes sense.
Okay. Do you think with these abductions, I've heard people talk about that it only happens in a dream state, and others are like, they physically come and walk me out of my house.
Sometimes take you out through the side of the roof, right?
Okay, yeah, I wanted to see what you thought about that.
No, it happens, and there's if you examine some of these people, they've got marks and burns on physiological issues.
Yeah. Hey, for the last few minutes we have, okay, so you're an investigator and your books will help, if you read it, you'll get some ideas on how to investigate these UFOs yourself as an amateur, that if you see something outside, what would you tell them to do? If they're in close contact, or they're looking out their window or on the road and they see anything, or they just want to go where the UFO sightings have been, what would you suggest that they do?
Well, normally what happens is when you get a case, somebody sends a case report to you, and this person had some kind of an experience. And so as the investigator, you're not the experiencer. You're not experiencing it. You're just there to investigate and document what happened and try to collect as much data as you can. So usually, if as an investigator, you're not in the middle of some of that phenomena. You're going out there and interviewing somebody that's had the experience and looking at, if there was burn marks on the ground, or if their car got magnetized, or, a lot of the stuff we did with the Bigelow project is we were very interested in cases where they had close proximity to the ground. So like if you had, a case report where this woman was at home and she had a farm with horses, big property and everything. And this thing comes over her property, and like the automatic driveway lights start coming on, and the burglar alarms start going off and stuff like that. And that's the kind of thing that, that's really good evidence, because it helps you understand that, first of all, it documents that something really happened. And it also helps you try to understand how the propulsion and the gravitic fields that come out of those things work, and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Great.
Would you wouldn't want them to go on their own with somebody, just in case?
You mean the investigator?
Yeah, if you're wanted to go investigate, somebody out on.
Jenny wants to investigate.
There's a news report that there's been some sightings, and so you go into this location. I wouldn't go by yourself. You'd bring a camera, video camera.
Well, in the book, I've got a detail of all the equipment you want to take with you, but there's safety in numbers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So if you want to learn, how to do it, get the book, and there's a chapter, and there's a chapter on dimensions. There's a chapter on the Bigelow project, or what you did with.
Yeah. There's a chapter in there on how to deal with the press. There's a chapter on equipment. There's a chapter on using. I think video camera is probably the most important thing to have, and there's a whole chapter on there on how to videotape interviews and how to videotape, look for evidence and that kind of thing. And can I say the book is available on Amazon? It's the UFO investigation, the methodology for New Age, and you can also buy it on our website in Virginia, and that's just langpublication.com.
Okay.
So if you go to langpublication.com, there's links to buy the book, and the ones we sell out of Virginia, people want them signed and salutations put on that. We do that, but otherwise they come out of Amazon.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to say goodnight tonight. It's that
Thank you.
bewitching time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us.
Educational.
Get in touch with me. I'd love to, work some cases with you or get together.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Absolutely.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say good evening, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for tuning into Chasing Prophecy. Hope to see you next week. Enjoy the full moon tonight.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Here we are in the Writers and Illustrators of the Future Lounge at the Author Services Building in Hollywood. It contains a gallery of the writer and illustrator judges, a selection of the awards the contests have received, a library containing novels and art books published by winners and judges, and a selection of photos of some of our beloved keynote speakers and guests. For nearly 4 decades, L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future contest has discovered and nurtured a steady stream of new authors and artists who have changed the face of science fiction. Chosen by an impressive panel of judges, drawn from the biggest names in the genre, contest winners are given the best possible foundation for a long-standing career. Now in its 3rd year,